Welcome to Crypto Bahamas, live from the SALT FTX Crypto Bahamas conference. All week long, we've been seeing guests from FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried, Gisele Bundchen, Tom Brady, of course, talking about partnerships and gaming, entering crypto, lots of conversations with hedge funds. There you see the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. It's been really a countrywide effort to integrate with blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and more. Very exciting. This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Let's have a live look at Bitcoin right now. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index is currently over the $40,000 mark now. $40,006, rising about 3.2% over the past 24 hours. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data. The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app. After 5 days of wayward performances, Bitcoin finally taking a turn upward, but analysts questioned whether the latest rally will have any staying power amid a predictably disappointing start to quarterly earnings, monetary hawkishness, and macroeconomic precariousness. Bitcoin remains in a tight trading range with support at $37,000 and initial resistance at $43,000. CoinDesk's Dominic Dantes saying momentum signals have weakened over the past week, which typically precedes a period of flat to negative price action. For now, buyers have kept prices anchored at around the $40,000 price level, unwilling to decisively break beyond that $47,000 resistance level over the past 3 months. And a negative reading on weekly momentum indicators is on the watch, which could increase the chance of a price breakdown. The current price action is similar to what occurred in 2018 and 2019, which was a long period of choppy trading and relatively low returns similar to equities. All right, joining us now to discuss Bitcoin price and more is Michael Moro, CEO of Genesis, which is a sister company of CoinDesk under the DCG umbrella. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. All right, so we're taking a look at Bitcoin right now. It's been a slump for most of the month, but now it seems to be a bit of bounce. What's going on?
So my view is we've been sort of in this range-bound trading pattern for most of 2022. And unfortunately, I think that trend will continue. Speaking to clients and investors, as well as kind of being here in person to do a lot of one-on-one conversations, the overall sentiment is still very bearish. And I think the consensus view amongst the ones we've spoken to is certainly that we'll likely see 30K before we see 50K in terms of where we are on balance. However, the contrarian trade would be in such a bearish environment. There's lots of people that are short, and that, you know, if you are able to time the market, probably the possibility of the short squeeze is certainly still there to the upside. And so most of the time, consensus turns out to be incorrect. So I think there are certainly opportunities for those who feel otherwise.
In light of that bearishness, and you're privy to flows all over Genesis Global Trading, so what kind of trends are you seeing?
So obviously, going back to last year, we saw tremendous volume. Starting in December, we started to see a slowdown in terms of the monthly trading volume, and that has continued certainly into 2022. Where we are, I think, in the marketplace for us right now is uncertainty. And when people are uncertain, they either sit on their hands and are very idle, trying to figure out, does the market kind of leg down or go back up, or they get scared, right? And they start to sell within the marketplace. And it's also important, I think, that for many traditional investors, crypto is a part of their overall portfolio. And we've seen the volatility happening in the equity markets, for instance, as they try to figure out things here as well as abroad. And they try to figure out, is, from a risk-reward perspective, where does Bitcoin ultimately fit into my overall portfolio. So we have seen folks that are looking to sell out of Bitcoin and take the contrarian view in some of the growth stocks that have been hardly hit in the equity market.
Interesting. And I'm curious about some of the conversations you're having here at Crypto Bahamas. And what are investors saying? What are their biggest concerns? Is it that they're concerned about the regulation gray area? Are they wanting to invest in Bitcoin ETFs and when spot Bitcoin ETF? So what are you hearing?
I haven't actually had one conversation here about a Bitcoin ETF. I think that's always going to be there, and it's almost like an unspoken truth that you also don't really need to address. It's interesting. I think for most people, one, I think many are just happy to be here, right, in beautiful Bahamas and seeing people after a couple.
You haven't seen the beach yet.
That's true. That's 100% correct, and I will hopefully get to see it. But certainly the scenery is fantastic. Secondly, I do think people are certainly have never been more bullish on Bitcoin long term. And so I think a lot of the macro things that you've seen happening, as well as kind of the traditional investors and the banks that are now kind of getting set to really enter the space en masse, have really said, okay, here we go. This is ultimately what's coming. Medium term to short term, though, the fact is kind of the price is very boring, very sideways trading. And I think we're really kind of stuck within, is Bitcoin a store of value? Or is Bitcoin a risk asset that still has the ability to go to, Cathie Wood's $1 million price target? And I think we're kind of in this indecision phase of the trading market today.
It could be both. We're in the Bahamas. I've found that the government has been very excited, enthusiastic about making innovation and attracting crypto businesses to the islands here. And, we are seeing more sovereign nations also start to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. The next one that has thrown their hat in the ring is the Central Republic.
African Republic.
The Central African Republic. Sorry about that. So, should that be more of a trend, of a catalyst that you expect to see going further?
So, on your first point on regulation, I think certain governments here in the Bahamas included have decided to treat digital assets as its own asset class and come up with own rules and regulations, which is certainly different than trying to regulate it just like other asset classes might be in equities and fixed income in some of their jurisdictions. And I do think that kind of looking at it as a standalone asset class is the right way to go. And I think that's why it's kind of viewed as a friendly regulator, certainly within the Bahamas. To your Central African Republic question, short term, I don't think it's really all that meaningful, but it is a trend of a long term of yet another country who has decided to accept Bitcoin as legal tender. Now, this particular country is one of the poorest countries in the world. The GDP per capita is under $500. And they only have about 500,000 people using the internet. And so, but in a country of about 5 million people, you have less than 10% of the population on the internet. And so my hope is that this push to kind of accept Bitcoin gets more and more people onto the internet as a stepping stone to improving the actual country. That's one aspect. Number two, there's 13 or 14 different countries in Africa today who is still working under the French franc, the CAF countries. And this is the first one to actually kind of break away from that Central African franc currency. So we'll see a trend whether some of the larger countries like Cameroon or Senegal actually start to adopt this. I think that becomes a lot more of an interesting story.
Great. And you're also here. You spoke on a panel earlier today. It was called Building a New Financial System, Stablecoins, Banks, and Beyond. And so just quick preview, what were the highlights? I
think the conversation is largely, especially as it relates to Bitcoin, are the banks hostile towards Bitcoin? What is kind of the attitude of kind of the biggest banks? And what you've seen over the last few years is a lot of, sort of vocal CEOs that are skeptical or dismissive of Bitcoin started to backtrack a little bit. I think you've heard language around, well, I don't believe in it, but our clients want it, and therefore we are going going to create products and services around the asset class. And so I do think they've come to the realization that this isn't going away. They can't dismiss it. And more importantly for their business, clients are going to figure out a way to get access. And if it wasn't going to come from them, they'll get it from someplace else. And so I do think that they're going to be one of the true ecosystem guys. And the fact that we've got from $0 to $2 trillion in market cap without a single bank doing anything really is notable. But I do think that there'll be a key player to take us from 2 trillion to 50 trillion or 100 trillion and kind of beyond. I think the banks will have a big say in making that happen.
Bitcoin has certainly caught their attention. Either innovate or get lost in the future. All right, Michael Moro, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you get to see the beach.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Michael Moro, CEO of Genesis. Next up, we'll talk about mining and debt financing and all the problems that miners have to struggle through in this down market. Next with Hut8 CEO Jaime Leverton. Welcome back. Battered Bitcoin miners increasingly are turning to creative debt financing rather than equity to fund growth. Analysts say this is increasingly becoming a more attractive option, but it's not available to everyone. Joining us now to discuss is Jaime Leverton, CEO of Hut8 Mining. Thank you for joining us, Jaime.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Sorry. All right, okay. Sorry, Jaime. So, as you can see here, I mentioned before that we had a story on miners are having to use some creative debt financing. Are you seeing that during this down market right now?
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing it. We're blessed in that this is our third market cycle that we've been a public company, and so we have generally taken quite a balance sheet first approach, trying to make sure we've stayed well capitalized throughout. But we did do a debt deal in January of this year where we were able to get some infrastructure financing for some of our landed miners at an attractive rate, which previously was very difficult to secure. So it's nice that we're starting to see more options, more players come into the space, offering more attractive debt options, particularly to the better funded publics in particular.
Is it a matter of using Bitcoin as collateral or using your mining rigs as collateral?
Yeah, so in our case, the debt deal that we did in January was using our miners as collateral. Right now, we don't have our Bitcoin encumbered at all, but it's a tool we've used in the past. In fact, with Genesis, who was just on, in the last bear market, we partnered with Genesis to secure capital with using some of our Bitcoin stack as collateral at that time when it was really difficult to access capital through other means.
Are you having to sell Bitcoin right now?
No, we're very blessed. We have consistently taken a balance sheet first approach. We have a very healthy cash position on our balance sheet. We have over 6,300 Bitcoin on balance sheet, which is also unencumbered at the present time. So we feel very grateful with the position that we're in, frankly.
At the same time, we're seeing in the stock markets a lot of public publicly listed miners have been seeing their stock price pummel almost 90% since previous peaks, 60, 70%. If they're not feeling the brunt of it. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly we're not immune. We're on the lower end of that side. Luckily, not at a 90% reduction, but still significant reduction to the highs that the industry was seeing back in September. And really, I think it all kind of points back to mid-November. There was a lot of hope in the system that a spot ETF would be approved in the U.S. When that didn't happen, it really put a lot of pressure on anybody that had that direct Bitcoin exposure, and miners in particular. And so, unfortunately, we have seen a lot of pressure roll forward since that November timeframe.
And when you see margins being compressed, what's the strategy to navigate the tough times?
Well, again, the industrial, the fully scaled miners like ourselves, when we talk about margins being compressed, they're still very, very healthy margins. So we're blessed to still be in a position where margin compression is the difference between kind of a 50 and a 70% type of margin range. Still incredibly healthy margins. We made a decision back in June to start mining Ethereum as well, but settling in Bitcoin. So that allows us to mine a Bitcoin for less than $3,000 Canadian, which of course is incredibly competitive, even with Bitcoin at a $40,000 USD price point. But again, I think every miner is different. We recently announced the purchase and subsequent closing of 5 enterprise data centers, a cloud colocation managed services business, which is all, of course, a fiat-based cash flow business, uncorrelated directly to Bitcoin. So we continue down the journey of a more diversified strategy, which gives us some protection for that downside volatility.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys expanding. But when Bitcoin's at all-time highs, investors are there, capital's being raised, and in the downtimes, are you seeing that sentiment kind of wane right now?
Absolutely. Capital markets are much tougher now than they were last year. But again, that's why those of us that have been around a long time know not to take any market cycle for granted. Things do move quickly in our space, and we feel very grateful that we've kind of had that mindset throughout the bull market, which is putting us in a good position into the compression state that we're in now from a capital markets perspective.
And are you still hearing that ESG debate rolling around from potential investors, and I wonder how the latest update on that?
Yeah, so it's funny that you use ESG. That no one's talking to us about the S and the G. It's all an E-focused conversation, and really it's less about the energy source that we're using as a community now. It's about the amount of energy that we're using. Period. And so I think that ultimately that's a conversation of value, and is Bitcoin valued as a technological innovation? And of course, all of us here in Bahamas believe very, very profoundly that it is. But that's the conversation that we're facing in the mainstream narrative today.
We've heard from some critics. The former the chairman of Ripple comes to mind, Chris Larson. Climate change activists say that Bitcoin should move away from proof of work and toward proof of stake. Yeah, you're laughing. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't give that much thought at all. I think that's about Ripple and their own narrative. Bitcoin, we see proof of work as a feature, absolutely not a bug. There's no consensus. I don't foresee any future consensus state of the Bitcoin community to move to a proof of stake position. Proof of work is what's securing the network. It's what's allowed it to.
They say they only need 50 or so miners to change the network.
That is not accurate at all. But certainly, I think there are a lot of people that would like to have this debate. And my view, and it's been talked about a lot here in the Bahamas, is Bitcoin is by necessity proof of work, and it needs to stay that way.
Jamie, awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining us in the beautiful Bahamas.
Thank you for having me, as always.
All right, that's Jaime Leverton, CEO of Hut8 Mining. All right, that's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Join us tomorrow morning as well, 9 a.m. Eastern for First Mover, as well as All About Bitcoin again at 3 o'clock. You're watching CoinDesk TV.